Most people think hitting rock bottom is the end. For me, it was a park bench, a divorce paper, and a baby I didn't know how to protect. But then, a shadow fell over me. A man from a past I thought was dead. He didn't just have billions in the bank. He had a secret that changed everything I knew about my pregnancy. Wait until you see what was written on a 10-year-old scrap of paper. Because my ex-husband didn't just kick me out. He walked right into a trap he never saw coming. This isn't a rescue story, it's a reckoning. If you believe that everyone deserves a second chance at love, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Now, let's see how a cold night in the park turned into a billion-dollar destiny. Let's dive in. Her fingers were still wet from the dish soap when the deadbolt clicked. Not a slam, not a bang, a click, quiet, final. Like a period at the end of a sentence she never got to read. She stood there, hands dripping, the sponge still gripped in her left fist, and the sound just hung in the air like smoke. The kitchen light buzzed above her. That cheap fluorescent one Mark kept saying he'd replace. He never did. She set the sponge down, slowly, the way you set something down when your body knows before your mind does. Then she heard his footsteps, not toward her, away, up the stairs, into the bedroom, the closet door sliding open, not her closet, his. She didn't move. The water in the sink was still running. She could hear it swirling down the drain, mixing with the last of the dish soap, pale blue turning clear turning nothing. Mark came back down in 3 minutes. She counted. He was holding a canvas bag, hers, the old one from college, the one with the frayed strap she kept meaning to fix. He didn't look at her face. His eyes stopped somewhere around her collarbone and stayed there. Here, he said. Just that. Here. He held the bag out at arm's length, the way you hand someone a thing you don't want to touch anymore. She took it. Her fingers were still wet. The fabric went dark where she gripped it. Inside she didn't look. Not yet. She already knew it wasn't much. The rain hadn't started. Not yet. But the air had that thickness to it, that pressure, the kind that sits on your skin and waits. Mark walked past her toward the front door. His shoes on the hardwood. 14 steps, she knew that count too. He stopped at the door. His hand on the knob. She thought he might turn around. Some part of her, the stupid part, the part that still believed in small mercies, thought he might turn around. He didn't. The door opened. The porch light caught the side of his face. His jaw was tight. His cigarette hand was shaking just slightly, just enough. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind him. Not a slam, a close. Control liberate. Sarah stood in the kitchen for another full minute, listening to the silence he left behind. The sink was still running. She reached over and turned it off. The house went quiet in a way it hadn't been in 5 years. A held breath kind of quiet. She looked down at the bag. Unzipped it with one hand. The other hand drifted to her stomach, not consciously, just the way it had been doing for weeks now, a reflex she couldn't stop. Inside the bag 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a toothbrush, her phone charger, and at the very bottom, folded once, the sonogram. She pulled it out carefully. The paper was grainy, black and white, all static and shadow except for that one small shape in the center. 4 months along. She'd been showing for 3 weeks. Mark never once put his hand where hers always went. She held the sonogram up to the kitchen light. The fluorescent buzz made the image flicker, and for a second the shape looked like it was moving. It wasn't. She folded it back up. Slipped it into the inside pocket of her jacket. The one with the broken zipper she wore everywhere. The rain started, not a downpour. A drizzle first. The kind that doesn't feel like anything until it soaks through you. She walked out the front door and didn't look back at the house. The porch light clicked off behind her. Automatic timer. Mark had set that too. The sidewalk was wet and gray under the street lamps. Her sneakers, thin canvas, not meant for rain, went dark at the toes almost immediately. She walked. No direction. No destination. Just forward, because standing still felt worse. 3 blocks. Then 4. The sweater underneath her jacket was already damp where it clung to her chest. The cold came through it like a slow knife. Her mind was doing the thing it does when it can't process, replaying small things. The way Mark's coffee cup always sat on the counter without a coaster. The sound of the TV he left on at night. The specific creak of the 3rd stair from the top. Little details. Worthless details. The details of a life she was no longer inside of. The park appeared at the end of the street the way it always did. The old iron fence. The gap in the hedge where kids cut through after dark. She went through the gap. The trees were thick here. Oaks, mostly old ones. Their branches spread wide and low enough that the rain didn't fully reach the ground beneath them. The grass was still dry in patches. Dark islands in the wet. There was a bench, stone, set back against a row of oaks where the streetlight barely touched. She sat down. The stone was cold through her jeans immediately. A sharp, bone, deep cold that had nothing to do with the weather. She set the bag beside her, pulled her jacket tighter. Her hands were shaking from the cold or from something else. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. The rain kept falling. Quiet, steady, patient. A car passed somewhere beyond the trees. Headlights swept through the branches for a second, and then they were gone and the dark came back. She thought about calling someone. Her phone was in the bag, 42% battery. She remembered that number for some reason. Who would she call? Her mother was dead. Her sister hadn't spoken to her in 2 years, not since the wedding. Not since Sarah chose Mark's side in that argument about nothing. She didn't call. The sonogram was in her jacket pocket. She could feel the edge of it against her ribs when she breathed. She breathed in, held it, let it out. The smell of wet oak leaves and damp earth filled her nose. Under it faintly the ghost of lavender. Her mother used to keep dried bundles in every pocket of every coat she owned. Sarah had kept one in this jacket for years. It was almost gone now. Just a trace. Just enough to make her chest tighten. Have you ever sat in a place so quiet that your own breathing sounded loud? Have you ever felt the weight of someone else's decision sitting on your chest like a stone, and realized there was no one left to lift it? She closed her eyes. The bench was hard beneath her. The rain was a thin, constant sound above the leaves. The baby shifted inside her, small, slow, barely there. A flutter, like something waking up. She put her hand on her stomach again. The oak trees creaked. The wind moved through them the way it always did, indifferent, mechanical, like something with no memory of anything it had ever done before. The streetlight at the edge of the park flickered once, twice, stayed on. Midnight came the way it always does, without announcement, and Sarah sat there, on that cold stone bench, in that wet and quiet dark, and for the first time in 5 years she was not pretending. The crack had been there for a long time. Running through the glass of everything she'd built with Mark, hairline thin, invisible unless you knew where to look. Tonight, the glass finally broke, and in the silence after, in that very specific, very empty silence, a pair of polished leather shoes stopped right in front of her bench. The footsteps were slow, unhurried, like someone who had all the time in the world and knew it. She didn't open her eyes, but then, a voice low, rough at the edges, a voice she had buried so deep she wasn't sure she'd recognize it. But she did. Sarah. Tusi. She opened her eyes. The rain was still falling. The same quiet, patient drizzle. Nothing had changed except everything. He was standing there. Close enough to touch, far enough to run from. Elias Thorne, not the boy she remembered, not exactly. The jaw was sharper now, the shoulders wider. The way he held himself, still, controlled, like someone who had learned the hard way that stillness was safer than movement. But the eyes were the same, dark, restless, the kind of eyes that never fully settled on anything, always scanning, always calculating, always one step ahead of whatever room they were in. Sarah didn't stand up. Her hands dropped from her stomach to her lap, a reflex hiding, covering. The way you cover something before someone can see it and decide what it means. Elias looked down at her. His gaze moved, not fast, not slow, deliberate, from her face to the canvas bag, to her jacket soaked through at the shoulders, to her hands still trembling, then down, to her stomach. He saw it. She watched his jaw tighten, just barely. The way a bolt locks when you turn it, a small movement, a big sound. He didn't say anything about it. Not yet. Instead he reached up, his right hand, steady, not shaking, and unclasped the buttons of his overcoat, one by one, top to bottom slow, like he was doing something ordinary, like he was hanging it up after work. The coat was dark charcoal, hand-tailored, the kind of fabric that doesn't wrinkle even in the rain. He draped it over her shoulders, not handed it, draped it, the way you cover someone who is sleeping, careful, quiet, like the act itself was something fragile. The warmth hit her immediately. Cedar. The coat smelled like cedar, sharp and dry and alive. It cut through the wet and the cold and the lavender ghost and replaced everything. She gripped the lapels with both hands, but she didn't take it off. Elias stood there in the rain now, in just his suit jacket underneath, and he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were on her face, not with pity. She had seen pity before, from cashiers, from neighbors, from the woman at the clinic who handed her the prenatal vitamins with that specific tilt of her head. This wasn't pity. This was something older. Something that had been sitting in a locked room for a very long time, and someone had just kicked the door open. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked. His voice was different now, deeper, quieter. The teenage boy who used to talk too fast, who stumbled over his own sentences when he was nervous, that boy was gone. This voice was measured, careful, each word placed exactly where it needed to go. "I don't know," Sarah said. Her own voice surprised her. Hoarse, thin, she hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. Elias nodded, like that was the answer he expected. He didn't sit down. He stood there, hands at his sides, rain collecting on his shoulders, and he looked at her the way someone looks at a wound they caused a long time ago and have been thinking about ever since. Sarah pulled the coat tighter. The cedar smell was everywhere now. It filled her chest when she breathed in. "You look," Elias started. He stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. She knew what she looked like. She had seen it in the bathroom mirror that morning, that specific morning that now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, looked at it for exactly 2 seconds, then put it back. He wasn't calling anyone. He was checking the time. 2017. "I have a car," he said. Factual. The way you tell someone the weather. Sarah didn't move. The rain dripped off the oak branches above them in uneven drops. One hit her knee. Another hit the stone beside her. She was looking at him and seeing two things at once: the man in front of her, expensive and still and controlled, and the boy from 10 years ago. The one who sat in the back corner of the college library with 3 textbooks open at once and a coffee that had gone cold hours ago. That boy used to tap his pen against his thigh when he was thinking. A fast, rhythmic tap. She used to hear it across the room. She watched his right hand now. His fingers were curled at his side, tapping against his leg, barely visible. But there, he hadn't changed as much as he wanted her to think. "Elias," she said. He looked at her. She didn't know what she was going to say after his name. She didn't have a sentence ready. She just needed to say it, to confirm that this was real, that he was standing in front of her and not a hallucination born from exhaustion and cold. "You left," she said. It came out quieter than she meant it to. Elias held her gaze. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. "I know," he said. "Just that, I know. Not I'm sorry. Not I had a reason." Not the 100 different explanations she had rehearsed in her head over the years, in the shower, in bed next to Mark, in the bathroom at 3 a.m. when the baby first started kicking and the loneliness hit so hard it felt physical. Just "I know." The rain picked up slightly. A thin mist now, hanging in the air more than falling. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. The cold had settled into her fingers, her wrists, deep into the bones. Elias watched her hands. Then he did something she didn't expect. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't offer his arm. He didn't move closer. He knelt down, right there, on the wet stone path in front of the bench. His knees hit the ground and he stayed there, eye level with her, and he looked up at her the way he used to when they sat on the library floor studying, and she would read passages out loud from the architecture textbooks. The same angle. The same eyes. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest, not break, crack open, like a seed splitting. Something that had been sealed shut for a very long time, letting something through. She didn't cry. Not yet. Her body was too tired for tears. It was running on something older than emotion, something mechanical, something that just needed to get through the next 10 seconds. Elias extended his hand, palm up, fingers slightly open, not grabbing, offering. He held it there steady. The rain was falling on his knuckles, running down his wrist, disappearing into his sleeve. He didn't pull it back. "I've spent 3,000 days looking for you, Sarah," he said. His voice was low, almost lost under the sound of the rain. "And I didn't find you just to let you spend another minute in this cold." Sarah looked at his hand. The rain kept falling. The oak trees creaked above them. That same old sound, indifferent, mechanical, like something with no memory. But Elias's hand didn't move. She reached out. Her fingers were cold and wet and shaking when they touched his palm. His hand closed around hers, warm, dry, firm, and he held on like he wasn't planning on letting go anytime soon. He stood up slowly, pulled her up with him. Gently, one hand on hers, the other hovering near her elbow, not touching, just there. Just in case. She stood. The park bench looked smaller now. The dark looked different from where she was standing, less heavy, less final. Elias let go of her elbow but kept her hand. They walked toward the gap in the hedge. The rain followed them out. 30. The car was black. No logo on the front, just a smooth, unmarked grille that swallowed the streetlight. The driver didn't turn around when they got in. Didn't ask where to go. He already knew. Sarah sat in the back seat and the leather beneath her was warm. Heated, she realized after a second. Someone had turned it on before they arrived. Elias closed his door. Didn't slam it. A soft click. The same sound as every other door in this car. Controlled, muffled, like the whole thing was designed to swallow noise. The engine started and she barely heard it. A low hum. Nothing more. The city began to slide past the window in streaks of amber and white. Sarah's hands were in her lap. She was still holding the sonogram in her jacket pocket. Her fingers had found it again without her telling them to. She touched the folded edge of it through the fabric, just to confirm it was there. Elias sat on the other side of the back seat. Not close, not far. A careful distance, the kind of distance you keep when you know that closing it too fast would break something. He was looking straight ahead, his right hand on his thigh, tapping, that same rhythm, fast, quiet, against the fabric of his suit pants. He caught himself after a few seconds and stopped. The silence in the car was different from the silence in the park. The park silence was empty, hollow, like a room with nothing in it. This silence was full, packed tight with everything neither of them was saying. Sarah watched the buildings pass. Glass towers, dark windows, 1,000 rooms full of people sleeping or pretending to sleep. She thought about asking where they were going. She didn't. The drive took 20 minutes, maybe 25. She lost track somewhere around the 15th minute, when the buildings got taller and the streets got quieter and the streetlights started spacing farther apart. Then the car turned down a long road lined with high hedges, trimmed perfectly, not a single leaf out of place, and the city disappeared behind them like it had never been there. The house appeared at the end of the road, not a house. That word was too small. Glass and steel. 3 stories. The kind of architecture that looked like it had grown out of the ground rather than been built on it. All clean lines and sharp angles. The walls mostly windows, dark from the outside but lit from within by a warm, low light that bled through the glass like something breathing. Sarah stared at it. The crack in the glass. That was the metaphor she couldn't shake, the one that had followed her from the park bench like a shadow. Her life splitting apart, the fracture lines spreading outward, everything she'd built with marks shattering in slow motion. But this building, this was the opposite. This was glass that held, glass that didn't crack under pressure. She could see it in the way the structure sat, solid, grounded, the steel frame invisible but holding everything together from the inside. She looked at Elias. He was watching her face. The car stopped. The driver opened her door before she reached for the handle. The air outside was different here. Cooler, cleaner. The rain had stopped somewhere during the drive and now the sky was just low and gray. The clouds sitting heavy and still like a lid on a jar. Elias walked beside her toward the front door, not holding her hand anymore. His hands were in his pockets, both of them, and he walked with that same controlled stride, like every step was planned 2 steps in advance. The front door opened before he touched it. A quiet click. A panel beside the frame glowed blue for a second and then went dark. Inside the air was warm. Not heated warm, alive warm. The kind of warmth that comes from a space that has been lived in for a long time by someone who pays attention to temperature the way other people pay attention to time. The floor was dark wood. Polished but not shiny. The kind of wood that had been walked on for years and had absorbed the weight of it. Elias led her through the ground floor without turning on any extra lights. The low, warm light was enough. It came from somewhere, built into the walls, maybe, or the ceiling, and it followed them as they moved, brightening slightly ahead of them, dimming behind. Sarah's footsteps sounded different here. Quieter. The wood absorbed the sound the way it absorbed everything else. He stopped at a staircase. Wide. Curved slightly. The banister was a single piece of dark wood, smooth as glass from years of hands passing over it. This way, he said. She followed him up. The second floor was a long hallway, wood floors again, the same warm light. Doors on either side. All closed except the last one at the end of the hall. That door was open. Light spilled out of it, softer than the hallway light. Warmer. Almost golden. Elias stopped at the doorway and stepped aside. Sarah walked in. The room was large. A bed, wide white sheets, the kind that looked like they were made by someone who folded clothes for a living. A window that took up almost the entire far wall, looking out over the dark garden below. A nightstand on each side of the bed. She stopped. On the nightstand closest to the window, a stack of books. She walked over slowly, looked down at them. Her books. From college. The ones she kept on her shelf in the apartment she shared with 2 roommates sophomore year. The ones she had left behind when she moved in with Mark because he said there was no room for them. She picked up the top one. Ran her thumb across the cover. The spine was cracked in 3 places. She remembered exactly where each crack had come from. Her throat tightened. She set it down carefully. Turned away from the nightstand. Elias was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. His arms were crossed, not closed off. Holding himself. The way you hold yourself when you're trying not to reach out and touch something. How did you? Sarah started. She stopped. Her voice had broken. Not dramatically. Just a fracture, small, quiet, like a hairline crack in porcelain. She pressed her lips together. Breathed through her nose. Waited for it to pass. It didn't pass. The tears came the way they always do when the body decides it's done pretending. Not all at once, but in a rush, sudden and ugly and loud. Her shoulders shook, her hands came up to cover her face and then dropped back down because there was no point in hiding. Not here, not from him. Elias didn't move from the doorway. He didn't say shh. He didn't say it's okay. He didn't cross the room and put his arms around her. He stayed where he was, leaned against the frame, and he let her cry. The sound of it filled the room, raw, broken, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than grief. From exhaustion, from 5 years of swallowing everything down and pretending it didn't exist. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her hands in her lap, the tears falling onto her jeans, making dark spots on the denim. The room was quiet except for her breathing, uneven, ragged, the kind of breathing that comes after. After a long time, minutes, maybe more, Elias spoke. "I knew about the divorce," he said. His voice was flat, not cold, careful, like he was carrying something breakable in his hands and didn't want to drop it. Sarah looked up at him. Her eyes were red, her face was wet. She didn't wipe it. "I knew about the pregnancy," he continued. He held her gaze. Didn't look away. "I've known about both of them for months, Sarah." The words landed in the room like stones dropped into still water. The ripples spread outward, slow, quiet, impossible to stop. Sarah opened her mouth. "Closed it how?" she said. One word, barely a whisper. Elias pushed off the doorframe, walked into the room, stopped a few feet from the bed, still that careful distance, and he looked at her the way someone looks at a confession they've been carrying for 10 years. "I left because they made me," he said. Sarah went still. The room went still. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "I didn't choose to disappear, Sarah. Someone chose it for me." His jaw tightened. That same bolt-locking movement she had seen in the park. "The people who controlled my family, they knew what you meant to me. They knew that if I stayed close to you, I would never become what they needed me to become." He paused. His right hand moved to his thigh. Tapping, he caught it. "Stopped, so they took me out of the country. Changed my access, cut every line I had back to you. And it took me 3 years just to figure out where you were." Sarah was sitting perfectly still on the edge of the bed. Her hands were gripping the mattress on either side of her, white, knuckled, tight, like she was holding onto something to keep from falling. The cedar smell from his coat was still on her shoulders. She could feel the fabric against her skin, warm and dry and heavy. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he said the thing that split the room in two. "Mark didn't just leave you, Sarah." His voice dropped, lower than it had been all night, quieter. "He was paid to marry you." The words hung in the air between them, dense, dark, unmovable. "And I'm the one who stopped the checks." Sarah didn't breathe. The room was completely silent. Outside, somewhere far below, a single drop of water fell from a leaf onto the garden stone. That was the only sound in the world. She didn't sleep that night. Not because she couldn't. The bed was soft enough to disappear into. The sheets cool against her skin. The pillows shaped like they had been waiting for the specific weight of her head. She didn't sleep because every time she closed her eyes, the words came back. "He was paid to marry you." Mark's face flashed behind her eyelids. Not the angry face, not the cold face she saw on the driveway. The other one. The one from their wedding night. When he looked at her across the kitchen table and smiled in that way she used to think was love. She stared at the ceiling until the gray light of morning started bleeding through the window. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like coffee and cedar wood. Elias was already there when she came down, standing at the counter, not sitting. His sleeves rolled to his elbows. The first time she had seen him look anything less than composed. He was holding a mug in one hand and reading something on a tablet with the other. He looked up when she walked in, didn't smile, didn't say good morning, just nodded. Once. The way you acknowledge someone who has been through something you can't fix with words. Sarah sat down at the kitchen island. The counter was cold marble black, with veins of white running through it like cracks in ice. She put her palms flat on it, felt the cold seep into her hands. A cup of tea was already in front of her, chamomile, steam curling up from it in a thin, lazy spiral. She wrapped her hands around it, didn't drink. The kitchen was large, all glass and dark wood, and that same low warm light she had noticed last night, built into the cabinets, the shelves, the underside of the countertops. Everything lit from within, like the house itself was breathing. A window behind the sink looked out over the garden. The morning was overcast. The hedges were wet and dark. A stone path wound through the middle of it and disappeared around a corner. Sarah watched a bird land on the edge of a planter box. It sat there for exactly 3 seconds, then flew away. "I want to show you something," Elias said. He set the tablet down on the counter, picked up a folder, thick manila, the kind that architects carry when they're going to a meeting they care about. He slid it across the marble toward her. Sarah looked at it. "Didn't touch it." "Open it," he said. Not a command, not exactly. Something between a request and a dare. She reached for it. Her fingers were still cold from the marble. The folder was warm, someone had been holding it recently. She opened it. Inside was a blueprint, large, detailed. The kind of blueprint that takes weeks to draft, clean lines, precise measurements. Every structural element mapped out with the kind of care that only comes from someone who understood exactly why each line existed. Sarah knew this blueprint. She knew it the way you know your own handwriting, instantly, in the bones, without having to think about it. It was hers. The building she had designed sophomore year. The one she had stayed up for 6 nights, straight drawing by hand on the drafting table in the architecture lab. The one Professor Harrington had called the most structurally ambitious student project he had seen in 22 years of teaching. The one she had thrown away in March 2019. A Tuesday. Portland. She remembered the exact moment, standing in her apartment with the rolled-up blueprint in both hands, Mark on the phone behind her saying they needed to focus on his career, his timeline, his future. She had put it in the recycling bin. It had taken her 4 minutes to close the lid. Now it was lying in front of her on black marble, crisp and clean like it had never been touched. Sarah's hand moved to her mouth. "Stayed there. How did you get this?" she said, behind her fingers, barely audible. Elias leaned against the counter opposite her, crossed his arms, watched her face the way someone watches a reaction they have been waiting a long time to see. "Professor Harrington kept a copy," he said. "I contacted him 8 months ago." Sarah stared at the blueprint. Her eyes moved across it, tracing the lines she had drawn, the measurements she had calculated by hand, the small notation in the bottom right corner where she always signed her work, SM, her initials. Faded but still there. Elias moved around the counter, stood beside her, close but not touching. He pointed to the blueprint. "This building," he said. "This is what I want to build." Sarah looked up at him. "What?" "I'm launching a new architectural venture, residential and commercial. The first project is this." He tapped the blueprint with one finger. A single tap. "Precise. Your design. Your vision. Your name on it." The kitchen was very quiet. The coffee machine behind him made a small mechanical sound, something internal shifting, water moving through a filter, and then went silent again. Sarah looked back down at the blueprint. Her hands were shaking again. That same trembling she couldn't control, but different now. Not from cold. Not from fear. "I don't," she started. She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "Elias, I haven't drawn anything in 4 years. I know. I don't even have a license anymore. It lapsed. I know that too." He said it the way someone says "I know" when they have already thought of every objection and dismissed them all. "I don't give handouts, Sarah." His voice was steady, flat, the voice of someone making a business decision, not a personal one. "I invest in talent, and you are the greatest architect I have ever known." The words landed somewhere behind her ribs. She pressed her lips together, looked away, looked back. "You're serious," she said. "I have never been more serious about anything in my life." The bird was back on the planter box outside. Same spot, same 3 seconds. Sarah looked down at the blueprint again. Her finger traced one of the lines, the main support beam, the one she had agonized over for 2 full nights, running the calculations over and over until she was sure the math was right. The pencil line was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. Something shifted inside her chest, not a crack this time. Something else. Something tighter. Something that had been wound down for years, compressed, held in place by the weight of everything Mark had put on top of it. It wasn't releasing. Not yet. But it was moving. That evening they worked. Elias set up a drafting table in the study on the 2nd floor, a real one, not a desk with a lamp. A proper drafting table, angled, with a light panel built into the surface that hummed softly when it was on. Sarah sat in front of it with a pencil in her hand and the blueprint spread open in front of her. The pencil felt foreign at first. Too light. Too thin, like holding something you used to know how to use but had forgotten the grip for. She held it anyway. Elias sat across the room at his own desk, working on something, emails, contracts, numbers on a screen. He didn't hover, didn't look over her shoulder. He just existed in the same space, doing his own work, and let her do hers. The room smelled like cedar and graphite in the faint, dry warmth of the light panel. Sarah drew, slowly at first, tentative lines she erased and redrew and erased again. Her hand remembered more than her mind did. The angle of the wrist, the pressure on the paper, the way you hold a pencil when you're drawing a load-bearing wall versus a decorative facade. After an hour the lines stopped being tentative. They became what they used to be. Sharp, confident, alive. She didn't notice Elias watching her until she looked up to stretch her neck and caught him. He was leaning back in his chair. His hands were wrapped around his coffee mug, cold by now. She could tell by the way the steam had stopped. His eyes were on her. Not on the blueprint. On her face. On the way her jaw set when she was concentrating. On the way her left hand moved to push her hair back without thinking about it. On the way she leaned forward, just slightly, when a line came out exactly right. He caught her looking. Didn't look away. Neither of them said anything. Sarah went back to the blueprint. Elias went back to his screen. The pencil kept moving. Outside, the clouds broke for the first time all day, and a single bar of late afternoon light cut through the study window and landed on the drafting table, right across the edge of the blueprint, right where Sarah's hand was drawing. She didn't notice, but Elias did. He watched the light fall across her hand and the paper beneath it, and he didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't tap his leg. He just watched. And somewhere deep in the house, a clock struck 6, a quiet, hollow sound that moved through the walls like water through stone, and the light shifted, and the moment closed behind them like a door. Then, at exactly 6:47, the mail arrived, not to the door, to a tray on Elias's desk, a quiet electronic chime, a small stack of envelopes appearing in the silver receiver mounted on the wall. Elias stood, walked over, picked up the stack. He went through them one by one. Bill, invoice, something from a law firm he glanced at and set aside. The last envelope was plain white, no return address, hand-delivered, no postage stamp. He opened it. Sarah watched his face change. Not fast, not dramatic, a slow shift like watching ice form on glass. The warmth in his expression didn't disappear. It froze. His hand tightened around the paper inside the envelope. "What is it?" Sarah said. Elias looked up at her. His eyes were cold. Colder than she had ever seen them, colder than the park, colder than the car, colder than anything. He held the paper out toward her. She took it. It was a legal notice, her name at the top, Mark's name beside it, and at the bottom, in clean, formal language, 2 words that made the blood drain from her face: full custody. Fivvy. Sarah read it 3 times. The words didn't change. They sat on the page the same way each time, clean, typed, precise. The kind of language designed to sound reasonable while it dismantles everything. Petitioner claims respondent is emotionally unstable. Petitioner claims respondent has no fixed residence. Petitioner claims respondent is unfit to raise a child. Each line was a small surgical cut, nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just one thin slice after another until the bleeding started, and you couldn't find where it was coming from. Sarah's hands weren't shaking this time. They were completely still. That was worse. She set the paper down on the drafting table, on top of the blueprint, on top of the lines she had drawn that afternoon, on top of the work that had made her feel like herself for the first time in years. The legal notice covered the blueprint exactly like it had been designed to. Elias was standing by the window. He hadn't moved since she started reading. His back was to her, his hands clasped behind him, his shoulders straight and rigid in a way she hadn't seen before. He was looking out at the garden, but not seeing it. His eyes were fixed on something far past the hedges, past the trees, past the dark. Sarah watched his reflection in the glass. His jaw was locked, the muscle beneath his ear twitching, barely, involuntarily, the way it does when someone is clenching their teeth and trying not to. "He wants custody," Sarah said. Her voice was flat, dead calm, the kind of calm that comes after the shock has passed and something colder has taken its place. Elias turned around. His face was composed, perfectly composed, the way a building looks composed from the outside while something structural is failing deep inside the walls. "He wants money," Elias corrected. He walked back to his desk, sat down, picked up his phone, not to call someone, to read something. His eyes moved across the screen fast, scanning. "This isn't about the baby," he said. "This is about me." Sarah looked at him. "Mark knows you're here," she said. Not a question. Elias didn't look up from the phone. "Mark has known since the second night." The words dropped into the room like stones into a well. Sarah listened for the bottom, for the sound of them landing, but it never came. "How?" she said. "Someone is watching this house. Someone has been watching since you arrived." Sarah stood up from the drafting table. Her legs felt solid, surprisingly solid, given what was moving through her chest. A cold, spreading pressure. The kind that starts behind the sternum and works its way outward, filling the ribs, the throat, the space behind the eyes. She walked to the window where Elias had been standing moments before. The garden was dark now. The stone path disappeared into shadow after the first bend. The hedges were black shapes against the slightly lighter black of the sky. She looked for movement. For a shape that didn't belong. For the glow of a phone screen or the red eye of a camera. Nothing. But that didn't mean nothing was there. She turned back to the room. Elias had set the phone down. He was looking at her, not with the careful, measured expression she had come to recognize. Something else. Something harder. Something that had edges. "Read the rest of it," he said, nodded toward the legal notice. Sarah walked back to the drafting table. Picked up the paper again. The bottom section was what she had missed, or what she hadn't been able to process the first time through. Mark's lawyers had attached a statement. A narrative. The kind of document that tells a story designed to make one person look monstrous on paper. The story they told was this. Sarah had been kicked out of the marital home due to erratic behavior and emotional instability. That she had in her desperation sought out a wealthy man, Elias Thorne, to provide financial security. That she had lured him using the pregnancy as leverage. That the child's welfare was at risk in the care of an unstable mother living under the roof of a man she barely knew. Every sentence was a lie. Every sentence was also, technically, hard to disprove without proof. Sarah set the paper down again. Her hand moved to her stomach. That reflex. Always that reflex. The baby was moving. A slow roll, not a kick. More like a shift in weight, like turning over in sleep. He's going to use this to get money from you, Sarah said, quietly. Not looking up, Elias stood up from his desk, walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away. He's going to try, Elias said. Something in his voice had changed. The measured, careful tone was gone. What was underneath it was older, roar. The voice of someone who had spent years being controlled by other people's decisions and had decided, at some specific point, to stop. But Mark doesn't know what he's walking into. Sarah looked up at him. His eyes were steady, not cold anymore, focused, the way a lens focuses, narrowing everything down to one single point. We're not just gonna win this, Sarah. He held her gaze. We're gonna make sure he never walks the streets of this city as a free man again. The words hung in the air between them, heavy, deliberate, the kind of words that once spoken can't be taken back. Sarah didn't flinch. Didn't look away. She nodded. Once, the study was very quiet. The clock on the wall ticked. That same hollow sound, water through stone, but faster now. More urgent. Elias turned and walked to his desk, picked up his phone, dialed a number from memory. No searching, no scrolling. He knew it by heart. The phone rang twice. It's Elias, he said. Flat. No greeting, no pleasantries. Wake up, Daniel. I need the full team in my office by 6 a.m. He listened for a moment, nodded once.
No, not tomorrow, tonight.
Call him now. He hung up, set the phone down on the desk with a quiet click. The same controlled precision he applied to everything. Then he turned back to Sarah. Go and rest, he said, softer now. The hardness still there, but beneath it, something else. Something that looked like worry, buried deep, almost invisible, but there. I'll handle the first move. Sarah didn't move from where she was standing. She looked at the legal notice on the drafting table, at the blueprint beneath it, at the pencil she had been holding all afternoon, still resting on the edge of the table where she had set it down. She picked up the pencil, not to draw, just to hold. The wood was warm from her hand. The graphite tip had worn down to a flat edge from hours of use. It fit in her grip the way it always had, like an extension of her fingers, like something that belonged there. She looked at Elias. He was watching her hold it. I'm not going to disappear again, she said. The words came out quiet, steady. Not a question, not a plea, a statement. The first real statement she had made since the park bench. Elias held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. I know, he said. Sarah turned and walked toward the door. The hallway was dim and warm. Her footsteps on the wood were barely audible. Behind her, in the study, Elias stood alone. He looked down at the legal notice on the drafting table, then at the blueprint beneath it, then at the pencil mark Sarah had left on the edge of the paper, a single, thin line, not part of any drawing, just a mark, a small, dark line pressed into the margin. The kind of mark you make when you're holding something tight and your hand is moving without you knowing it. He stared at it for a long time. Then he picked up his phone again. The second call went out at 11:14 p.m., the third at 11:31. By midnight, 4 lawyers, 2 investigators, and 1 forensic accountant had been put on retainer. Sarah didn't know any of this. She was upstairs in the guest room, lying on top of the white sheets in her clothes, one hand on her stomach, the other holding the sonogram up to the dim light from the window. The baby moved again. That same slow, rolling shift. She watched the shape on the sonogram, that small, grainy outline, and pressed her free hand harder against her belly, as if she could feel it from the outside the way she felt it from the inside. She couldn't, but she kept her hand there anyway. The room was quiet. The house was quiet. Somewhere far below, she could hear the faintest sound, Elias's voice on the phone, low and rapid, the words too muffled to make out through the floor and the walls and the distance between them. Sarah closed her eyes. Sleep didn't come easily. It circled the edges of the room like something cautious, something that wanted to come closer, but wasn't sure it was safe. At 20:17 a.m., it finally did, and at 20:23 a.m., the sharp, bright pain started in her lower back, sudden blinding, the kind of pain that cuts through sleep like a blade through paper. She sat up. Her hands were shaking again. Something was wrong. She knew it the way the body knows things before the mind catches up, instinctive, animal, immediate. She reached for the nightstand, her phone. Her fingers couldn't grip it properly. She dropped it once, picked it up, called the only number she had. Elias picked up on the first ring. 6E. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, not sharp, not chemical, Just present, a thin, constant layer underneath everything else, the way dust settles on furniture you haven't moved in years. Sarah lay on the bed in the white gown they had given her. The paper crinkled every time she shifted, a dry, brittle sound that filled the small curtain space around her bed. The monitors beside her beeped, steady, mechanical, a metronome counting seconds that meant nothing to anyone except the machines. Her hands were on top of the white blanket, palms down, fingers spread. She was watching them the way you watch something you no longer fully trust, waiting for them to shake, waiting for the trembling to start again. They were still. The pain had stopped 20 minutes ago. The doctor, a woman, mid-40s, hair pulled back in a clip that was coming loose on one side, had come in, checked the monitors, checked Sarah, and said, "You're okay, the baby is okay, your body needed to slow down, as if Sarah had been running, as if she had a choice." Elias was in the waiting room. She knew this because he had told her, in the car, on the way here, his voice tight and controlled in a way that wasn't quite calm. He had said, "I'll be right outside. Not I'll come in with you. Not I'll hold your hand. Just I'll be right outside." Like he was standing guard. Like the waiting room was a perimeter he was defending. Sarah stared at the ceiling. White tiles, 12 across, she had counted them twice already. The fluorescent light above her buzzed. The same pitch as the one in Mark's kitchen, that cheap, flat hum that vibrates somewhere behind the eyes if you listen to it too long. She closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids the legal notice. Mark's name, the words "unfit mother" sitting there in clean, typed letters like they belonged on the page. Like they were facts. She opened her eyes again. 12 tiles. Still 12. The curtain around her bed shifted, not from wind. From someone pulling it aside. The doctor was back. She had a tablet in one hand and a manila folder in the other, thinner than the one Elias had shown her with the blueprint. But heavier somehow. The way a small object can be heavy, when what's inside it weighs more than the thing itself. The doctor pulled up a chair, sat down beside the bed, not standing over her, at the same level, eye to eye. That was the first thing Sarah noticed. Doctors don't sit down unless something has changed. "Ms. Mitchell," the doctor said. Sarah looked at her. The doctor's face was composed, professionally composed, the kind of composure that comes from years of delivering information that changes people's lives in the span of a single sentence. But her eyes were doing something else, something the composure couldn't fully hide. Confusion. "We ran the standard blood work when you came in," the doctor said. She set the tablet down on the edge of the bed, opened the manila folder. "Routine screening, iron levels, glucose antibodies." She paused, looked at Sarah. "Is the father's medical history available?" The question hung in the air like smoke, thin, persistent, impossible to wave away. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, not pain, not the physical kind, something deeper, something tectonic. "Mark," she said, "my husband, ex-husband." The doctor nodded, slowly. The way someone nods when the answer they just received doesn't match the answer they were expecting. "We found something in the blood work that doesn't align with what we'd expect if he were the biological father." The words came out carefully, measured, each one placed with precision. The way Elias placed words, Sarah realized. The way anyone places words when they know the weight of what they're carrying. Sarah didn't breathe. The monitor beeped. Once, twice. The rhythm didn't change. The machine didn't know what had just been said. It just kept counting. "What do you mean?" Sarah said. Her voice was very quiet, flat, the same dead calm from the night she read the legal notice. The doctor turned the folder toward her, pointed to a section of the report, rows of numbers, abbreviations, reference ranges highlighted in pale blue. "Blood type incompatibility," she said. "Your blood type is a positive. The baby's preliminary markers indicate B negative. For that combination to occur, the biological father would need to carry at least one B allele." She looked at Sarah. "Mark's blood type is O positive. He doesn't carry a B allele. It's genetically impossible for him to be this child's biological father." The room was very quiet. The monitor beeped. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere beyond the curtain, a trolley rolled past, wheels on linoleum, a quiet, mechanical sound that belonged to a different world entirely. Sarah lay completely still on the bed. The ceiling tiles stared back at her. 12 across. Still 12, but the room had changed, the air had changed. The weight of everything in it, the bed, the blanket, the monitors, the folder, the doctor sitting beside her, all of it had shifted, like the ground beneath a building had moved 1 inch to the left and the whole structure was recalculating. The doctor stood up, quietly, like she understood that something had happened that wasn't medical, something personal, something that needed space. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be at the nurse's station if you need me." She left. The curtain swung shut behind her. The paper rustled. Sarah lay there. Her mind was doing the thing it does when it can't process something all at once, breaking it into smaller pieces. laying them out one by one, looking at each one separately before trying to arrange them into something that made sense. Piece 1: Mark is not the father. Piece 2: the timeline. The one night. The night before everything fell apart. The night before Elias disappeared, when they were 19 and reckless, and the future was still something that hadn't happened yet. Piece 3: the baby inside her, the one she had been carrying for 4 months, the one she had been protecting with her hand and her breath and her fear, was not Mark's. It was Elias's. The realization didn't arrive like a shock. It arrived like something she had always known but had buried so deep she forgot it was there, a fact waiting in the dark, patient, solid, ready to surface the moment the light found it. Sarah turned her head toward the curtain. Elias was on the other side of it. She knew this without seeing him. She could feel it, the same way you feel someone standing behind you in a dark room. A presence, a weight in the air. "Elias," she said. The curtain moved. He stepped through it slowly. Not rushing, not hesitating. Just moving, one step, then another, the way someone moves when they have already decided what they are going to do, and are simply closing the distance. He was still wearing the same clothes from last night. His jacket was off, draped over the back of a chair in the waiting room, probably. His sleeves were rolled up again, the way they had been in the kitchen that morning. His face was unreadable. He walked to the side of the bed. Stopped. His eyes went to the monitors first. Checking. Making sure the numbers were stable. Making sure she was okay. Then his eyes moved to the folder on the edge of the bed. He picked it up. "Read it." Sarah watched his face. It took him 40 seconds. She counted. 40 seconds to read the page that changed everything. His hand, the one holding the folder, tightened. The paper made a small sound, not a crinkle, a compression. The sound of something being gripped too hard. He set the folder down. Carefully, like setting down glass. Then he looked at the sonogram. It was on the nightstand beside the bed, the same one Sarah had been carrying in her jacket pocket since the night in the park. She had taken it out when the nurse asked about gestational age. It had been sitting there ever since. Elias picked it up, the same way he had picked up the folder, carefully, but different. His hand was shaking, not a tremor, not the fine, barely visible vibration she had seen in the park. A real shake. His fingers moved against the paper like they couldn't decide whether to hold it tighter or let it go. He stared at the sonogram, the grainy black and white image. The small shape in the center. The one Sarah had been looking at for weeks in the kitchen, on the bench, in the guest room at 2 a.m., his child, their child. Elias didn't speak. Sarah watched him look at the sonogram and she saw something she had never seen on his face before. Not in the park, not in the car, not in the study when he made the phone calls. His eyes were wet, not crying, not close to crying, just wet. A single, thin layer of moisture that he blinked away before it could become anything more. He set the sonogram down on the nightstand. Gently. Like placing something sacred on an altar. His hand stayed on it for a second longer than necessary. His fingers resting on the edge of the paper. Touching it the way you touch something you are afraid might disappear if you let go. Then he pulled his hand back. He looked at Sarah. The monitor beeped, steady, mechanical. "Counting seconds. All this time," he said. 2 words, barely above a whisper. Sarah held his gaze. She didn't say "I didn't know." She didn't say "I didn't think about it." She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. The way you look at someone when the distance between you has just collapsed, and there is nothing left but the truth. Elias stood there for a long time. His right hand moved to his thigh, started to tap. He didn't catch it this time. Didn't stop it. The tapping went on, fast, rhythmic, quiet, while his eyes stayed locked on hers. Then something changed in his expression. The wetness was gone. The shock was settling, not disappearing, but sinking down, compressing, making room for something harder. Something with direction. He straightened up, pulled his shoulders back, the way a structure reinforces itself, redistributing weight, finding the load-bearing points, holding firm. "Mark has no standing," he said. His voice was steady again, the careful, measured tone, but underneath it, underneath the control, something was burning. No legal rights, no claim, nothing. He looked at the sonogram one more time, then back at Sarah. "Now," he said. His jaw tightened. That bolt-locking sound, quiet, final, irreversible. "We don't just go to court." He held her gaze. "We go to war." The monitor beeped. The fluorescent light buzzed, and somewhere in the hospital far away, in a room Sarah would never see, a printer started moving. Elias's lawyer, already awake, already working, already pulling the threads that would unravel Mark's case before the sun came up. Sarah lay on the bed and listened to the machines count the seconds. The sonogram sat on the nightstand beside her. The small shape in the center, their shape, held perfectly still in the grainy black and white, but inside her the baby moved. A kick this time, small, sharp, certain. like something that had finally decided it was ready to be known. 70. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Not the grand, wood-paneled hall from movies, high ceilings, dramatic light falling through tall windows. This was a working room, beige walls, fluorescent panels. The kind of carpet that had seen 10,000 shoes cross it and remembered none of them. Sarah sat at the table on the left side, her hands folded in front of her. Still, she was wearing a dark blue dress, simple, clean, the kind of thing that says nothing and everything at once. Elias had left it on the dresser in the guest room 3 days before the hearing without a note. No explanation. Just the dress laid out flat, like it had always been there. It fit perfectly. Elias sat beside her. Not close enough to touch, close enough to feel. His suit was dark. His hands were on the table, palms down, fingers spread, completely relaxed. The way someone looks relaxed when they have already won, and are simply waiting for the room to catch up. On the other side of the aisle, Mark sat with his lawyers. Sarah didn't look at him. Not out of fear. Not out of anger. She just didn't need to. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Elias's legal team moved through Mark's case the way water moves through cracked concrete, quietly, precisely, finding every weakness and widening it until the whole structure gave way. The first thing they presented was the financial trail. Daniel, Elias's lead lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that never rose above conversational volume, laid it out piece by piece: the payments, the account numbers. The intermediary who had funneled money from a shell company directly into Mark's personal account starting 6 months before he proposed to Sarah. Mark's face didn't change when the documents were presented. But his left hand, beneath the table, where he thought no one could see, curled into a fist. Sarah saw it. Not because she was watching him. Because she was watching the table. The way the wood grain ran across its surface, straight lines interrupted by knots, the natural flaws in the material that no amount of polishing could hide. She thought about the blueprint. About load-bearing walls. About how a structure fails, not all at once, but from the inside, where the stress has been building for years. The second thing they presented was the blood work. The doctor from the hospital, the same woman with the loose hair clip, took the stand and explained in clear, simple language what the genetic markers showed. Mark could not be the biological father. The science was unambiguous, irrefutable. The kind of fact that doesn't care about narratives or legal strategy or what story someone wants the world to believe. Mark's lawyer stood up to object. Daniel didn't even look at him. Sustained or not, Daniel said quietly, the DNA doesn't change. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, almost smiled. Almost. The third thing they presented was Sarah. She stood up from the table when Daniel nodded to her, walked to the front of the courtroom, sat down in the witness chair. The room was very quiet. Mark's lawyers looked at her the way predators look at something they have already decided is small, with a casual, comfortable certainty. They were wrong. Sarah answered every question in a flat, steady voice. No stammering, no tears, no dramatic pauses designed to make the judge feel something. She just told the truth. The truth about the marriage. The truth about Mark's behavior, the small, consistent erosion of everything she was, ground down so slowly she didn't notice it happening until there was nothing left to erode. The truth about the night she was kicked out. The park. The bench. The rain. She told it the way you read a blueprint, line by line, measurement by measurement, each detail precise and necessary and load-bearing. When Mark's lawyer stood up to cross-examine her, Sarah looked at him directly, not with defiance, not with anger, with clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from someone who has already been through the worst thing and survived it, and is no longer afraid of what anyone in a beige, walled room can do to her. The cross-examination lasted 40 minutes. By the end of it, Mark's lawyer had stopped making eye contact with his own client. The judge took 30 minutes to deliberate, 30 minutes in which Sarah sat at the table, and didn't move and didn't speak and didn't look at Mark. Elias sat beside her. At some point during those 30 minutes, his hand moved across the table, slowly, carefully, and covered hers. Not holding, just covering. The way you cover something you want to protect from the cold. Sarah turned her hand over beneath his. Let their fingers interlock. Neither of them looked at the other. They just sat there hand in hand, side by side, two people who had found each other twice in the dark and were no longer willing to let go. The judge came back. The ruling was short. Mark's custody claim was denied. His financial fraud was referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. His lawyers were given a look, just a look, brief and precise, that communicated everything words didn't need to. Mark stood up from the table. He didn't look at Sarah. He walked out of the courtroom with his lawyers on either side of him, not like an entourage. Like an escort. The door closed behind him. Sarah exhaled. It was the first full breath she had taken in weeks. They left the courthouse together. The day was warm, not hot warm, the kind of warmth that comes in late spring when the air has finally stopped fighting the sun and surrendered to it. The sky was blue, not the pale, washed-out blue of winter. A real blue, deep, saturated, the kind of blue that looks almost impossible, like someone painted it by hand. Sarah stopped on the courthouse steps and tilted her face up toward it. The sun was on her skin, warm, dry, direct. She closed her eyes and let it sit there. Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her face, not saying anything, just watching. They drove back to the house in silence, not the heavy silence of the first car ride, packed tight with unspoken things. This silence was different, empty in a good way, the kind of empty that comes after something has been removed, not taken away, but released, set down, put to rest. Sarah watched the city pass through the window. The same streets, the same buildings, the same glass towers with their dark windows. But the light was different today. Everything caught it, the wet sidewalks, the car hoods, the windows of the shops, the leaves on the trees lining the boulevard. All of it burning quietly in the afternoon sun. Elias drove himself today. No driver. No back seat. They sat side by side in the front, close enough that Sarah could smell the cedar on his jacket, that same sharp, dry, alive scent that had been constant since the park. She breathed it in, and for the first time, it didn't remind her of rescue, it just reminded her of him. He didn't drive to the house, he drove past the turn. Past the hedges, past the long road that led to the glass and steel and the warm light. Sarah noticed but didn't ask. The car moved through the city and out the other side of it, past the suburbs, past the strip malls and the gas stations, into the quieter streets where the houses had yards and the trees were old and the sidewalks cracked in places no one had bothered to fix. He stopped at a park, not a grand park, a small one, a patch of green between two residential streets, with a rusted swing set and a few benches and a row of oak trees along one edge. Sarah looked at the oaks. She knew this park, not this exact park, but this kind of park, the benches, the oaks. The way the light filtered through the leaves and hit the ground in uneven patches. The same kind of place where she had sat on the worst night of her life. Elias turned off the engine. They sat in the car for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled, small metallic sounds, like something settling into stillness. Then Elias opened his door and got out. Sarah followed. The air was warm and smelled like cut grass and the faint, sweet decay of fallen leaves, spring cleaning itself, making room for what was coming next. They walked across the grass toward one of the benches. The same kind of stone bench she had sat on that night, rough, cold in winter, but warm now in the sun. Elias sat down. Sarah sat beside him. Not the careful distance from before. Not the measured gap he had maintained in the car, in the kitchen, in the study, always close enough to feel, far enough to run from. They sat close. Their shoulders almost touching. The oak trees rustled above them. A quiet, dry sound, leaves moving against each other. The same mechanical indifference she had heard that night in the dark. But now the leaves were green. Now the sun was on them. Now the sound was warm instead of cold. Elias was quiet for a long time. His hands were in his lap, not tapping. Completely still. Sarah watched a bird move through the branches above them, hopping from one limb to the next, pausing, moving again. No pattern, no destination, just movement. Then Elias reached into his jacket pocket, not the cedar jacket, the suit jacket from the courtroom, dark, well-tailored, the one he had worn all day. He pulled out a piece of paper, old paper, yellowed, folded twice, once horizontally, once vertically, the creases worn soft from years of being folded and unfolded. He held it in both hands for a moment, looked down at it, then he unfolded it. Sarah leaned forward to see. It was notebook paper, the lined kind, blue lines, 3 holes punched on the left side. The kind of paper every teenager used in high school, cheap, common, disposable. But the writing on it wasn't disposable. 2 columns of handwriting, his on the left, hers on the right. She recognized her own writing immediately, the way she made her S's, the way her letters leaned slightly to the right when she was writing fast. She remembered this, not vaguely, not as a half-formed memory somewhere at the edge of consciousness. She remembered exactly. The library. Their library, the one in the college basement that no one used except them. A Thursday night in October. They were 17, the summer before freshman year, visiting campus for orientation weekend. They had found the library by accident, stumbling into it while looking for the cafeteria, and they had stayed for 6 hours because neither of them wanted to leave. At some point, Elias had pulled out a notebook and written, "When we're 30, we get married. No arguments." And Sarah had written underneath it, "Fine. But I get to design the house." They had both signed it, their full names, their initials. The date at the bottom, a pack, stupid, teenage, meaningless, except Elias had kept it for 10 years. Sarah stared at the paper, her handwriting stared back at her. young, confident, full of a future that hadn't happened yet. She looked up at Elias. He was watching her face the way he always watched her face, like he was memorizing something he had been afraid he would never see again. "I never looked at another woman," he said, quiet, not dramatic, just a fact, the same way he stated business decisions, legal strategies, architectural plans. A fact. Not once. Not in 10 years. He looked down at the paper. At the date written at the bottom in his own teenage handwriting. "I was waiting for the clock to strike 30, he said. Sarah's throat tightened. She pressed her lips together, breathed through her nose, held it. Elias folded the paper once. Carefully, along the original crease, the one that had been worn soft from a decade of being carried. He slid it back into his pocket. Then he moved, not standing up entirely. Lowering himself, one knee on the grass, the other bent, his body angled toward her the way it had been on the park bench that first night. The same position. The same angle. The same eyes looking up at hers, but different now. Everything was different now. In his hand, open palm up the way it had been in the park, was a ring. Simple, a single stone. Not large, not ostentatious. The kind of ring that doesn't demand attention, but holds it once you notice it. A quiet, certain thing. Sarah looked at the ring. Then at him. The oak trees rustled above them. The bird was gone. The sun was lower now, the light coming in at an angle, golden and warm, catching the leaves and the grass and the stone of the bench, and the ring in his hand, and everything else in the world that was still and quiet and waiting. Elias looked up at her. Not as a billionaire. Not as the man on the cover of business magazines. Not as the man who had dismantled Mark in a courtroom that morning. As the boy from the library. The one who wrote stupid pacts on notebook paper and kept them in his pocket for 10 years because he didn't know what else to do with a love he couldn't say out loud. "It's 2026, Sarah," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The pact is up." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Sarah looked at him, at his face, at his hands, at the ring sitting in his open palm, and she felt the last crack seal shut, not with a sound. Not with a dramatic shift or a sudden warmth or anything the body registers as change. It just closed, quietly, the way a wound closes when it has finally had enough time, not healed completely, not without a scar, but closed, sealed. Dawn bleeding, she reached out, not for the ring, for his hand. She took it the way she had taken it in the park that night, fingers interlocking, palm against palm, and she held on. "Yes," she said. One word. Quiet, certain. Elias slid the ring onto her finger. His hands were steady now. No shaking. No trembling. The fingers that had trembled holding the sonogram in the hospital, the hands that had shaken in the park that first night, they were still. The ring settled into place. Cool against her skin. Small and solid and permanent. He stayed on one knee for a moment longer. Not performing. Not holding the pose for effect. Just looking at her. The way someone looks at something they have waited a very long time to see. Then he stood up, and they sat back down on the bench together, side by side, shoulders touching, hands still linked between them. The sun moved lower. The shadows lengthened across the grass. The oak trees held their quiet, indifferent rustling above them, the same sound it had always been, the same mechanical movement of leaves against air. But Sarah wasn't listening to the trees anymore. She was listening to the baby move inside her, that small, slow roll, that quiet shift of weight, and she pressed her free hand against her stomach and held it there. The park was still around them. The bench was warm beneath them. And somewhere in the distance, past the oaks, past the streets, past the city they had both broken and rebuilt, a clock struck 6. The sound carried through the air and faded. And then there was just the light, falling through the leaves. Catching the ring on her finger. Settling on their hands where they held each other. Quiet, golden, unhurried, staying. His lawyers were given a look, just a look, brief and precise, that communicated everything words didn't need to. Mark stood up from the table. He didn't look at Sarah. He walked out of the courtroom with his lawyers on either side of him. Not like an entourage. Like an escort. The door closed behind him. Sarah exhaled. It was the first full breath she had taken in weeks. They left the courthouse together. The day was warm. Not hot warm. The kind of warmth that comes in late spring when the air has finally stopped fighting the sun and surrendered to it. The sky was blue. Not the pale, washed-out blue of winter. A real blue, deep, saturated. The kind of blue that looks almost impossible, like someone painted it by hand. Sarah stopped on the courthouse steps and tilted her face up toward it. The sun was on her skin, warm, dry, direct. She closed her eyes and let it sit there. Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her face, not saying anything, just watching. They drove back to the house in silence, not the heavy silence of the first car ride, packed tight with unspoken things. This silence was different, empty in a good way, the kind of empty that comes after something has been removed, not taken away, but released. sat down. Put to rest, Sarah watched the city pass through the window. The same streets, the same buildings, the same glass towers with their dark windows, but the light was different today. Everything caught it, the wet sidewalks, the car hoods, the windows of the shops, the leaves on the trees lining the boulevard, all of it burning quietly in the afternoon sun. Elias drove himself today. No driver, no back seat. They sat side by side in the front, close enough that Sarah could smell the cedar on his jacket, that same sharp, dry, alive scent that had been constant since the park. She breathed it in. And for the first time, it didn't remind her of rescue, it just reminded her of him. He didn't drive to the house, he drove past the turn, past the hedges, past the long road that led to the glass and steel and the warm light. Sarah noticed but didn't ask. The car moved through the city and out the other side of it, past the suburbs, past the strip malls and the gas stations, into the quieter streets where the houses had yards, and the trees were old and the sidewalks cracked in places no one had bothered to fix. He stopped at a park. Not a grand park. A small one, a patch of green between two residential streets, with a rusted swing set and a few benches and a row of oak trees along one edge. Sarah looked at the oaks. She knew this park. Not this exact park, but this kind of park. The benches, the oaks. The way the light filtered through the leaves and hit the ground in uneven patches. The same kind of place where she had sat on the worst night of her life. Elias turned off the engine. They sat in the car for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled, small, metallic sounds, like something settling into stillness. Then Elias opened his door and got out. Sarah followed. The air was warm and smelled like cut grass and the faint, sweet decay of fallen leaves, spring cleaning itself, making room for what was coming next. They walked across the grass toward one of the benches. The same kind of stone bench she had sat on that night, rough, cold in winter, but warm now in the sun. Elias sat down. Sarah sat beside him. Not the careful distance from before. Not the measured gap he had maintained in the car, in the kitchen, in the study, always close enough to feel, far enough to run from. They sat close, their shoulders almost touching. The oak trees rustled above them, a quiet, dry sound, leaves moving against each other, the same mechanical indifference she had heard that night in the dark. But now the leaves were green. Now the sun was on them. Now the sound was warm instead of cold. Elias was quiet for a long time. His hands were in his lap, not tapping, completely still. Sarah watched a bird move through the branches above them, hopping from one limb to the next, pausing, moving again. No pattern, no destination, just movement. Then Elias reached into his jacket pocket. Not the cedar jacket, the suit jacket from the courtroom, dark, well, tailored, the one he had worn all day. He pulled out a piece of paper, old paper, yellowed, folded twice, once horizontally, once vertically, the creases worn soft from years of being folded and unfolded. He held it in both hands for a moment. Looked down at it. Then he unfolded it. Sarah leaned forward to see. It was notebook paper. The lined kind, blue lines, 3 holes punched on the left side. The kind of paper every teenager used in high school. Cheap. Common. Disposable. But the writing on it wasn't disposable. 2 columns of handwriting, his on the left, hers on the right. She recognized her own writing immediately. The way she made her S. The way her letters leaned slightly to the right when she was writing fast. She remembered this. Not vaguely. Not as a half-formed memory somewhere at the edge of consciousness. She remembered exactly. The library. Their library, the one in the college basement that no one used except them. A Thursday night in October. They were 17. The summer before freshman year, visiting campus for orientation weekend. They had found the library by accident, stumbling into it while looking for the cafeteria, and they had stayed for 6 hours because neither of them wanted to leave. At some point, Elias had pulled out a notebook and written, "When we're 30. We get married, no arguments," and Sarah had written underneath it, "Fine, but I get to design the house." They had both signed it, their full names, their initials, the date at the bottom, a pact, stupid, teenage, meaningless, except Elias had kept it for 10 years. Sarah stared at the paper, her handwriting stared back at her, young, confident, full of a future that hadn't happened yet. She looked up at Elias. He was watching her face the way he always watched her face. Like he was memorizing something he had been afraid he would never see again. "I never looked at another woman," he said, quiet. Not dramatic, just a fact, the same way he stated business decisions, legal strategies, architectural plans, a fact, not once. Not in 10 years. He looked down at the paper. At the date written at the bottom in his own teenage handwriting. "I was waiting for the clock to strike 30, he said. Sarah's throat tightened, she pressed her lips together. Breathed through her nose. Held it. Elias folded the paper once, carefully, along the original crease, the one that had been worn soft from a decade of being carried. He slid it back into his pocket, then he moved. Not standing up entirely, lowering himself, one knee on the grass, the other bent, his body angled toward her the way it had been on the park bench that first night. The same position. The same angle. The same eyes looking up at hers. But different now. Everything was different now. In his hand, open, palm up, the way it had been in the park, was a ring, simple, a single stone, not large, not ostentatious. The kind of ring that doesn't demand attention but holds it once you notice it, a quiet, certain thing. Sarah looked at the ring, then at him. The oak trees rustled above them, the bird was gone. The sun was lower now, the light coming in at an angle, golden and warm, catching the leaves and the grass and the stone of the bench, and the ring in his hand, and everything else in the world that was still and quiet and waiting. Elias looked up at her, not as a billionaire, not as the man on the cover of business magazines, not as the man who had dismantled Mark in a courtroom that morning, as the boy from the library, the one who wrote stupid packs on notebook paper, and kept them in his pocket for 10 years because he didn't know what else to do with a love he couldn't say out loud. "It's 2026, Sarah," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The pact is up." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Sarah looked at him, at his face, at his hands, at the ring sitting in his open palm, and she felt the last crack seal shut. Not with a sound. Not with a dramatic shift or a sudden warmth or anything the body registers as change. It just closed, quietly. The way a wound closes when it has finally had enough time, not healed completely, not without a scar, but closed, sealed, done, bleeding. She reached out. Not for the ring, for his hand. She took it, the way she had taken it in the park that night, fingers interlocking, palm against palm, and she held on. "Yes," she said, one word. "Quiet, certain." Elias slid the ring onto her finger. His hands were steady now. No shaking, no trembling. The fingers that had trembled holding the sonogram in the hospital, the hands that had shaken in the park that first night, they were still. The ring settled into place. Cool against her skin, small and solid and permanent. He stayed on one knee for a moment longer, not performing. Not holding the pose for effect, just looking at her. The way someone looks at something they have waited a very long time to see. Then he stood up, and they sat back down on the bench together, side by side, shoulders touching, hands still linked between them. The sun moved lower. The shadows lengthened across the grass. The oak trees held their quiet, indifferent rustling above them, the same sound it had always been, the same mechanical movement of leaves against air. But Sarah wasn't listening to the trees anymore. She was listening to the baby move inside her, that small, slow roll, that quiet shift of weight, and she pressed her free hand against her stomach and held it there. The park was still around them. The bench was warm beneath them. And somewhere in the distance, past the oaks, past the streets, past the city they had both broken and rebuilt, a clock struck 6. The sound carried through the air and faded. And then there was just the light, falling through the leaves, catching the ring on her finger, settling on their hands where they held each other, quiet, golden, unhurried, staying.